Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today, I'm joined by the tall lady, kindness seeker Mao, Mike Painter, and a special guest, Men Are Human, from the Men Are Human Discord server and Saturday YouTube stream of the same name. Today, we're going to talk about the current disengagement of men in society, why it's happening, and most importantly, what the men's movement can do with it. So pull up a stump and join us. And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We just went through this once, but I guess it didn't get recorded, so I'm going to try it again. I wanted to kick us off by saying that what I'm talking about is looking at the current disengagement and disaffection, especially of young men, but really men in general, and now even boys, regarding their interest in things like dating relationships and romantic commitments, marriage, fatherhood, things like that, as well as pursuing careers and pursuing higher education, overall social and societal civil engagement, that they're starting to not do that. But my observation and my concern is that it has become time to do that, for sure, because all the other more traditional avenues for redress have failed. The legal system, the political system, most of the social system, and the government, social services systems have failed us outright, and look to be geared to continuing in that failure. And it's becoming more and more difficult every day not to think that failure is deliberate, because it seems to be so persistent, and it seems to persist in obviating or dismissing our concerns, but the failure on those men on their part is that they are doing it, but they are not doing it in any kind of organized or intentional way. They're literally just giving up and walking away in despair or out of fear or out of resentment or bitterness, but they're doing it alone, and they don't have to. They could do it together, and they could do it in an organized way, and they could do it in a way that lets the people objecting so strongly to it know that they are not going to stop walking away. They're not going to stop desisting from social engagement until it is safe for them to come back. I've been around long enough to know that, the simple reality is other movements, other actions, other activism to try to make that happen so far have not worked. Because the one thing that, up until very recently, we haven't been able to bring ourselves to do is just say no and just walk away and say, we'll come back when you can provide us what we need. The important thing is we are not coming back until you do, and until you can prove that you do. This is something that I learned again, from the labor movement. That was the only thing that worked, right? Because violence and quitting as individuals, running away, being afraid, all of those things failed again and again and again. Okay? And people died as a result of it. Okay? People were imprisoned, had their lives ruined, had their families' lives ruined as a result of these ineffective means. But when they got together, and when they started to strike, and when they started to say, we aren't coming back to work until you can provide us what we need, then as of today, we have, at least in the US, a 40-hour standard work week. with additional compensation for anything over that, protections against uninterrupted work days, meaning that no, by law I can't work more than 6 days in a row. That health insurance is a condition of my full-time employment, which is standard, at least in America. That I have legal protections against an unsafe or hostile working environment for which there are, monetary and in some cases criminal penalties for violating. The point that I'm trying to make is that those actions worked. Okay? They were able to provide and persist in providing what was being demanded. The other things failed, and a lot of people died, and a lot of people were ruined as a result of those failures. Okay? And those failures were when these same actions were taken in a disorganized and atomized, in other words, individual way. Any one person or any small group of persons who were working could quit working and go away and get other jobs, and the management structure never cared, okay, and never changed a thing as a result of that. They simply replaced those people, right? But when all of the workers said none of us are going to work and none of the work is going to get done at all until we can bargain for a reasonable contract and a reasonable work agreement, then everything changed. And those changes persist to this day. And all I'm saying is that the same thing could be done for men as a demographic, that we can simply disengage, as we have been in recent years, and say the reason we're disengaging is because it is not safe for us to engage. When it is safe for us to engage, we'll be right back. Until then, we won't. So that's my take on it. Mao, did you want to speak up?
Oh, yeah. I did have something to say. And once again, thank you for having me back. It's super cool being with Tell Lady and Ma and Dead Talk once again in the same call. That's pretty cool. And I'll try to summarize what I was saying before. So my main concern is not really I don't have a problem with men striking, the concept in general. I mean, the idea of some men abandoning marriage or abandoning the idea of raising, having children, raising families, or just I don't know, leaving the workforce altogether to focus on I don't know, whatever they can do for a living. My main concern is the consequences angle, so what I always tell people to focus is who benefits from all of this, from men striking against marriage or abandoning their dreams of raising families or getting into relationships in general, or abandoning the workforce. And then who benefits from the opposite, from men biting the bullets and not protecting themselves against institutional harm and just going with the status quo. So we do know that some political ideologies benefit from both sides, clearly we have a lot of people who will benefit from it all, and no matter what they do, from the status quo or the opposite. So what I always tell men is that no matter what you do, you gotta be careful when it comes to benefiting your political enemies, because one way or another, either through action or inaction, you can do that. You can actually hurt yourself and benefit your enemies. So what I tell men to consider is to think of your options and to choose whatever is the best for you, And there are there are many options out there, and you gotta be wary of like anyone who wants to pressure you into like agreement or taking a stand, um, and or even like trying to narrow your options down to like a binary choice or like a one choice solution. Like those people are actually your enemies. Um, and there are many examples because there are a lot of like young men who have been like successfully radicalized into joining like extremist movements or holding like very radical ideas because they were convinced like those are the only solutions for their specific problems, you know? Because like there are a lot of problems in the world and they wanted solutions and they happen to be convinced by them, you know? So I say like to be wary of that, to be wary of those people who are constantly trying to like manipulate you. And one of the ways that you can actually see this is who tries to take away options from you and whomever tries to like narrow your options down. Those are your real enemies. So you have to understand yourself. You have to understand like what you're doing and why you're doing, like why you're striking down against the system, why you're going on a general strike against marriage or child raising, even if it's like your dream, even if it's something that you want to do, and even though you may have a good understanding of like protecting yourself against like a very nasty divorce, knowing that like maybe your children won't be recognized as yours, you know, alimony and all of that. Even though that is true, you also have to understand like your options because striking like eventually has to end, and there are many like political ideologies that are very hungry to feed you solutions on how to proceed, to how to get to the end of the strike so you can get what you want out of the deal. So you gotta be wary on that. And I'm not gonna tell people what to think or how to choose, but I'm only going to tell them that to be wary of anyone who wants to like narrow their options down. So that would be like my advice and my take on everything, you know. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in, and if anyone has anything else to say.
Well, I
I
think oh, no, go ahead, Ma. Go ahead.
well, what I was going to say is that we need to realize that the MGTOW stuff, the men, opting out, all that sort of stuff is a sign of social decay, and we need to be very careful about saying that this is like the definite solution, because what it really is just men protecting themselves individually. I don't think this is a mass movement or anything like that. But I mean, except for the MGTOW movement itself, but my issue is that what's the end game with this? Like, they fix everything and everyone goes back to normal. Is that really going to happen? Or is it just going to be this slow decline where they ignore the problem, ignore the problem, ignore the problem until it's just completely trashes our society? I mean, I've never been disappointed when it comes to the feminist capacity to ignore the problem. It is just something that they absolutely do, like to a person. They will completely ignore the problem. The only way to get them to change their mind is to force them. And I'm not sure that men opting out is actually forcing them to do anything, because all it really seems to do is give them another target. So it's like, these men aren't participating, they hate women. Are we going to get anywhere with them thinking that? I mean, it's just something I've been thinking about for a little while. Are we going to get anywhere with men just not engaging? I mean, as much as it does protect the individual men, I think a lot of these men are going to end up feeling very, very sad about their situation after a few years. I mean, I am in a similar situation in that I'm gay and I don't really date women. And I'm coming to a crux now where I'm thinking, okay, but how do I have children? Nobody in my family has had children. None of the men in my family have had children, and it is saddening. It is depressing. Like this family ends with us, and I don't want it to, but I don't see a solution. I mean, my one brother seems to have opted out of dating completely. The other brother is opting out of children completely, more or less. So, like, where do we go from here? Like, what's the end game? I mean, we can talk about men opting out all we want, and we can say, yeah, these men they've essentially saved themselves, but have they saved themselves? I think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, and I agree, the concern that both of you brought up, that, as it is right now, in this sort of, I don't know how you'd put it, the MGTOW, I don't know if you even call it, they don't like you to call it a movement. They, want it to be known as a philosophy. It was a non-starter, because it is so individualistic, and it is so short-sighted as far as the overall impact and the end point. They don't provide for an exit strategy at all, right? And a lot of them do end up just more bitter and more isolated and more disaffected. As I say, it is an appropriate action taken as a long-term strategy to a short-term problem. And it's being done for all of the wrong reasons. The same, I don't know how you'd put it, the same actions as activism done intentionally, and Mao, as you were pointing out, done with the understanding that if we're not vigilant, we can be overrun by extremists, people who just wait in the wings to, try to take over, disorganized and vulnerable groups of people, who are not solid and in solidarity in their purpose and in their activism. That was one of the things that plagued the labor movement for a long time, because at least here in the US, the labor movement was overrun and absconded with by organized crime for a long time in America. And it was basically because of, Mao, what you were talking about, that the people in the labor movement were allowed themselves to be vulnerable to a lot of promises and a lot of false sense of security that the people in organized crime could offer them. We could fall victim to the same thing, but my point is we don't have to. And Ma, to respond to your query, as things are right now, you're 100% right. There is no, this is all being done, all this disengagement and disaffection is being done mindlessly, in a very disorganized and thoughtless manner, with lots of infighting and disagreement and animosity from the inside. The red pillars can't stand the black pillars, and the black pillars are dismissive of the incels, and the MGTOWs are sort of very self-righteous and dismissive of all the rest of them. And like I said, if it continues that way, then yeah, that brand of activism is doomed to failure. It won't work under those conditions. People don't work that way. They never have. What's
There's
that?
no plan. There's no plan.
Right,
Like MGTOW
exactly.
has no plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is a cul-de-sac.
Mhm.
It's one way in, no way out.
Right, a
So
dead end.
yeah, so the only way out is to reverse and then completely quit being MGTOW. Like that's all
Well,
you've got. It's like you
yeah,
either keep with it or you
right,
quit. There's no okay, I can then progress from being a MGTOW to having a family, because you just can't do
right,
that.
right.
You can't progress, like it's a dead end.
Yeah,
And once you get into that dead end, it's like, well, okay, I've protected myself, but this situation I'm in now is pretty nihilistic. Like,
right,
I'm not working towards anything.
right,
I might be building up my own finances, but I'm not going to do anything with them except maybe go on
right,
a lot of holidays.
right,
And
right,
I'm sure I'll have fun on those holidays, but
right,
like, what am I building here with my life?
right. Or I'm getting a passport,
Yeah.
that, which is another pipe dream. And that's why I backed out of it. And I'm at a stage of life where, I don't even have to be compelled to have a family. Um, to be honest with you, and kind of in response, even I, freely admit that uh, my life would be more complete and I would be more whole and more healed if I had at least a partner, and I always make sure I make no secret of that. And again, I compare that to the striking union worker. The striking union worker has absolutely no intention of abandoning his work forever. He is doing what he is doing specifically so that he can go back to doing his job. And it also does not mean that he somehow forgets how to do his job, right? And it also does not mean that he is not making any sacrifice for the purposes of being able to go back to his job in the future. I tell people all the time, strike wages are often less than the minimum wage. It requires a great deal of discipline and sacrifice, right? And it's not gone into lightly, and it's not gone into with just an emotional outraged flounce and bounce, where you just tip the table over and leave in a huff. And it is always to the end that a workable agreement can be negotiated, and that an arrangement that is more tenable for everyone can be come to. But if nobody asks for that negotiation never happens, right? And MGTOW, in particular, because they are so vocal, they are a classic example of the failure to do that. They 15, 20 years ago, they could have taken that one final step and said, we are persisting in this only until we can sit down and reason and bargain like grown-ups. They just never did that. To this day, they don't do that. And the only thing I say is that you could do that anytime you want to, right? It's kind of for mainstream MGTOW activism, it's probably too late for that. I think they would not be in any position to lead that kind of activism and advocacy. They've already poisoned the well. And like I said, until somebody can do that and do it from some position of strength, it's not going to happen. They could have done it, they just didn't. I think it was really stupid considering the amount of intellect and thought and discussion that they've all put into it. The one conclusion they never arrived at was, what if we tell people we're just going to keep doing this until they start treating us like human beings? I've not once have I ever seen that in MGTOW discussion or literature. And like I said, it's that end of it is really not that complicated, right? And it's not by any means a new idea. Nothing about what I'm proposing is unprecedented at all. None of it. But the only thing about it unprecedented is that it hasn't been deployed in this arena, for these issues, right? A lot of what the most radical disaffecteds have done is violent and certainly illegal, and certainly immoral, and offensive, right? Every time I see somebody that has walked away from the table and, then decides to spend hours and hours on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, bad-mouthing women, just women, I think to myself, if you keep that up, your life and things in general are never going to get better, and they're probably going to get worse. And there's nothing anybody can do about that, because that's just how human beings are. Really, I mean, if nobody sees a path to redemption, and if nobody sees, or if nobody offers, a path to, reconciliation and forgiveness, there won't be one. That's, like I said, this is not rocket science. Of course not. If you shut the door and lock it from the outside, and throw the key away, the people that you've locked in aren't coming out, and I would say the same to, people who are so dismissive and disdainful of men. You have locked us in, for some reason you threw the key away, we're offering to build another door and let you in, right? But in order to come in, you have to be ready to negotiate and figure out how we don't end up in this situation again. Because otherwise what we're going to do is stay in here. Like I said, this is not, it's not unprecedented. The way I'm proposing to do it, it has a moral tradition, that certainly predates all of us. Okay, so I'm not going to entertain the idea that it's unthinkable, okay? Because it is thinkable, and at some point it becomes reasonable, and at some point it becomes, a legitimate means to a reasonable end. But to answer your concern, Ma, it is done specifically with the purpose of an end. And unfortunately, my guess would be whatever that end is, it's not going to look the same as the way things have always been, because the way things have always been is kind of how we got ourselves into this mess in the first place. Right? So I just don't, I don't see the conservative traditional path as being sustainable. As human beings, we have held that up about as long as we can, and either we let it down easily or it'll crush us. And again, these aren't, I don't like it. None of these are like easy solutions. My solution is by no means an easy solution, and it's not something to just put in place and then walk away from, and that's why I don't, right? One thing that Mao brought up, again, that is, a serious vulnerability to what I'm proposing is the fact that, it can be confiscated, right, and taken over by the same people, that put us in the position that we're in now, right? And one thing that I'm finding in my discussions on the political left is that a great many people on the political left really feel like their movement and their advocacy and their activism has just been absconded with, by their adversaries. Every time you see, the rainbow flag on a big marketing campaign during Pride Month, these same people just cringe and complain bitterly because they know that's just the man, overtaking their advocacy and their activism, and using it against them.
It didn't used to annoy me, but it annoys the heck out of me now. I mean, it's like they don't advocate for this stuff in countries where like it's legal. They don't do this in Saudi Arabia. Like you can see lists of their Twitter accounts and like China and stuff like that. If it's taboo to be gay in that country, they don't do it. So it's clearly not because they care about the gays. It's
No.
clearly because they care about the profits and they think this is a
Right.
trendy thing to get on board with.
Right. Yeah. A really kind of like unfortunate recent example was what happened when Anheuser-Busch, kind of provided a little bit of sponsorship and recognition to Dylan Mulvaney. That was a regrettable event all the way around. And in the short term, I think it was a real disservice and a real dishonest performance by Anheuser-Busch, for just actual regular old transgender people. I obviously it probably did Dylan Mulvaney some good. That's one. There's lots of them now, and I'm willing to say that over time, the rank and file of the transgender community is going to look back on that whole thing, right, and say, man, I wish they just hadn't done that. And I've talked to gay people, again, that, are at the point now where they're kind of bitter about even things like Pride Month. This is, this is just, a dog and pony show, right? It doesn't mean anything. It hasn't changed their life for the better. And it hasn't made it, it hasn't made it any more comfortable or any other, or any closer to, like any real progress. It's just, like I said, it's just a big dog and pony show put on by the same people that 25 years earlier, would have just been just as happy to, see gay people fall off a cliff. Because they don't care, man.
Yes, well,
They're basically going to create a new wave of homophobia and transphobia. The transphobia part has already started. Like if you, like I swear, I keep telling people, listen to the enemy, listen to what people say on liberal podcasts, conservative podcasts, all this sort of stuff. You've got to listen to all of them. Right now, the conservative podcasts are absolutely crowing about the Dylan Mulvaney thing. They like it's a huge thing for them. Like they see it as the whole thing as an attack on the woke. Like this is for them. This is a mass protest against the woke crowd, and it's going to sweep up actual people into this. And the activists, this isn't going to hurt the activists, because what will happen is the activists will just vanish.
Right.
You know, when it becomes too untenable to be an activist, they'll just vanish.
Right.
They'll stop. Like they weren't really like, this is why they have an extra special Q on the end of LGBTQ now, because the Q doesn't stand for anything gay. It stands for activists. Like this is something people don't realize, is the Q stands for activists,
Mhm.
and the activists are going to they specifically say in the academic stuff that queer people don't have to be on any of these spectrums. They don't have to be gay or trans or bi or anything. They can be
Right.
straight. They
Right.
can be cis.
Right.
And this is the thing. They are going to create such a wave of homophobia, transphobia, everything. And it, like, not, I'm not talking about the conservatives. I'm talking about the people, the activists.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
Well, I
then
wouldn't even call them
it's kind
activists,
of
though. I think the problem is that people
grifter.
have misguided the name of activists. You know, the people you're talking about that are going to create this new wave that we're already seeing transphobia, unfortunately, um, becoming more prevalent because of what's going on. I wouldn't even call them activists because they aren't actively doing, excuse my French, shit.
Yeah.
They're
You are
passive
right.
more so than anything else because they're just following what everyone else is saying. I think about a lot of the transphobia, a lot of things going on is people reposting and reposting a post or reposting from Twitter or reposting an article and they haven't read anything. All they see is, oh, you know, all this transphobic this, homophobia that. For us in minority groups, it's, you know, oh, white supremacy this, against blacks or Latinos or this and that. No one's being active at all. They're not actually actively reading, actively looking, actively researching, actively trying to figure out what's going on and solve it. They're just passing the word and just saying, I'm jumping on the hype train now. Woo, woo.
Yeah.
They are grifters, and they are bringing back racism. They're bringing back homophobia. They're bringing back all of these things that were dead and buried, and it's all related to a certain set of critical theory ideologies that have essentially taken over the universities and have basically turned them into these lunatic factories. And these people, they come out, and it's not even like the conservatives are saying this as well, that they actually just they don't have a goal, they don't have anything they want. They're just picking up on the latest thing and running with it and attacking anyone who disagrees with it. And then as soon as the next latest thing comes along, they jump on that and they attack the people of the who were on the previous thing. Even sometimes
Right. Right.
it's like the trans thing. The same people who are pro-trans now, a lot of them, like, these people are going to turn into like the biggest anti-trans people that you've ever seen. And they'll say, oh, my eyes were opened and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Many of them are.
yeah,
You know. But
I mean, I've been saying for years that this whole thing's going to overboil. That, like, I mean, the trans women in sport, that was a bridge too far. That is, that's where things really start. This is why I argued before on our own podcast that we need to treat trans people as in a sort of an honorary third category, and
And there
allow
were
them to do
discussions
their
of
thing.
that too. There were
Yeah.
discussions that there should be a separate transports category. And I actually think it might have been one of the what are they called? The International Organization for Women, the very big feminist movement, feminist organization. I'm trying to remember the name. Why can't I think of it? Women's Resource Center, something like that. That said, oh, but they're sort of still women and stuff. And like it was this whole thing, but no one ever really had a thing against them having their own category. The people who refused for there to be a separate category for people who honestly aren't even really like, I don't want to say they're not affected by the issue, but they are not the people involved.
And they've with all this sort of this definition stuff where they're basically doing the 1984 thing and saying that because we've defined something a certain way, it is in physical reality this way. Because they're taking it that way instead of taking it in a more empathetic, well, you weren't born in this body, but we can treat you this way. They've created a situation where cisgender men are actually signing up to these women's sports. Yeah, that's the book. I've got one too. They've opened the thing to people who are anti-woke and anti-trans are signing up to these things, and then they're using these this mental trick against them, because as soon as you just have to declare it, and so they're having fun with it, and so there's no real criteria, and so they can just this is what happened when what's his name, Loudworth Crowder guy, he went
Stephen
into an
Crowder.
abortion clinic, with stubble on his face and in a stupid dress, and asked them to give him an abortion. And you could see the woman there fighting against her training, which was telling her that she has to go along with this. But I mean, there's clearly a physical reality here that Crowder can't have children. He can't give birth to children. He's had children, but he can't give birth to them. But you see this with other activists. You'll see them, they'll say, they say all sorts of things. They just they use all of these different, because there's more switches than just that one that have been defined now, but they use all these little switches where it's all jigged in the language and stuff like that. And it is insane to me that they didn't see this coming, because 1984 was written in 1948, published in 1949 if I remember, and everybody, I think, should read this book. Everybody. It is part of what I call the dystopia trilogy. It's not really a trilogy, but it's 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451. And I think everyone should read these books, because they explain the situation we have right now so clearly, so perfectly. It's 1984. It wasn't a prophecy. People call it prophecy. He was just explaining what was going on in the Soviet Union and China. But it's
it seems to be more prophetic than he ever intended it to be. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
it seems honestly, it was like that in the Soviet Union and stuff as well.
Exactly. And I was going to say the common thread there in those three books, right? And, in other expository literature, like the Gulag Archipelago, the Killing Fields, all of those, they've all got this common thread, where the power structure that ended up taking over generated and maintained, instability and uncertainty and infighting and disorganization over the people that they were oppressing, and the fact of the matter is that for a long time, in the cases represented by real life, the Gulag Archipelago and the Killing Fields, for a fair amount of time, it worked, and, as I say to people, undergoing what we're all undergoing here, the hard reality is that what they are doing with us, that keeps us, as I say, infighting, disorganized, uncertain, very individually driven. It's very effective. you know, it really is. I mean, it works like a charm, right? That, you know, as long as especially men, you know, plain old cisgendered, ordinary men, you know, gay or straight, as long as, you know, we are never sure of our footing, we are never sure of our place, we are never sure of who we can trust, okay, we can take no action. We are stuck, you know, in the situation that we're stuck in, and they continue to, like I say, you know, or as you said, Mao, play these games, you know, where they just have, you know, people jumping from one ideology to the next, right? And in the process, you know, abandoning or exiling, you know, the people that they were sitting next to a year earlier, right? You know, in solidarity, right? So as I say, you know, the ideas that I'm proposing, you know, they don't come for free, and they are, you know, they are just as vulnerable to being overrun and stolen as any of these previous movements. You know, the only solution is to go into it with our eyes open, and yeah, most important of all, with an endpoint in mind. You know, the kind of job that we are working feverishly to work ourselves out of, you know, and to not have to continue doing, right? Because they created a treadmill for themselves that they're going to have to stay on forever, you know, and I don't want that. You know, as you guys have all heard me say before, my, you know, ideal outcome is that all of your descendants look back at this time in history and just shake their heads and say, man, how could they have let themselves get into that situation? You know? I mean, I want to end up looking stupid to them. Okay? I want all of us to end up looking stupid to them, because to be frank with you, we're being kind of stupid. You know, we're not accepting realities and taking responsibilities that are being shoved in our faces every day. I mean, I don't like that. It's
better question is
embarrassing.
whether we'll have descendants to even look back at us and think we're stupid at this point. As we mentioned earlier, people are just like stepping away, and they're stepping away even more so as the generations continue, and it's been frightening how little people really want to be in life, per se.
I had a conversation with my oldest yesterday in the car. I was asking him if there's a young lady on the horizon yet or not. And I said, then by the way, if you do back to the other side, I don't care. You're still my son. Doesn't change anything. But he said, no, I'm not gay, Dad. I'm not interested. Now, I don't know about anybody else in the room, but certainly when I was 16 years old, that was all I was interested in, to be quite honest with you.
I mean, that's the thing. That's for normal for them. My brother's around the age of your eldest. Yeah, I joke around sometimes, but I'm just like, don't mention a girl's name. I'm like, excuse me. And who is this female? He went, you think I'm gonna date?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because my son said that there is a girl he's interested in, but he said dating's just too much hard work these days, so he's not going to bother. Okay.
Well, I mean, there was a time, and you know, Dad and well, you and I, you know, back there, like we were more than willing to shoulder that work, you know, and I mean, for specific, like at least what looked to us like perfectly reasonable reasons, you know, like perfectly valid reasons. Yes, I want to be a husband. Yes, I want to, or well, starting. Yes, I want to have dates. Yes, I want to be a husband. Yes, I want to be a daddy. Yes, I want to, you know, be a working guy, you know, whatever the case may be. I want to like do stuff, you know, for the common good and what have you. And like I said, you know, as long as we continued believing that, you know, like everybody kind of just let us do that, you know, and in the background there behind the curtain, you know, they were arranging it so that, you know, no matter what we did, best possible outcome for somebody in our age cohort, best possible outcome, you know, as these things progressed and became more and more part of the mainstream, best possible outcome, a life led looking over our shoulder, you know, right? And, you know, without any sense of security or validity for what we were doing. Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, if we are now at a place where it is more that insecurity than, you know, forget about the work, you know, the rewards aside, you know, it's just time to say, if all there is uncertainty, and, you know, for at least 50% of us, disaster, right? Then why are you asking us to do what you're asking us to do?
Yeah.
You know, because and why should we be doing it?
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, 20 years ago, the current leadership or the current thought leaders of things like the MGTOW movement could have just said that. You know, they could have just said, look, you know, we're just not going to do this until, you know, we can have some sense of at least, you know, reasonable level of risk if we do it. That's all they would have had to say. And they could have just shut off their microphones and, you know, put down their keyboards and said, you guys let us know when you're going to get this straight. Until then, we're going to be over here. And they would never, you know, they could have just walked away, but they didn't do that. You know, they got all smart and decided, wow, you know, I can get a lot of attention, and some of them, you know, can get money, right? You know, for just continuing to rattle on about it in this really hopeless and negative way. And they've been doing that for 20 freaking years. You know? And I'm like, guys, shut up. You know,
I've got a few other things to add.
Sure.
I think my son and I are going to have a conversation, because otherwise I failed him as a father. But that's a side thing. The whole idea of men just walking away collectively is, as the comment I made when you were talking about Dylan Mulvaney earlier on, and Anheuser-Busch, it's an anti-aircraft shell to both feet. Forget about the shotgun, because who is going to be left clearing up the mess caused by men walking away? It's going to be men at the end of the day. And it's not going to, I mean, we saw it with COVID, didn't we? It wasn't the guys in the suits and everything else that were the ones that were keeping everything ticking over. It was the guys with calloused hands. You know, it was the guys working 15-hour days out in the fields, or, you know, or what have you. They were the ones that were really just keeping things ticking over. And what it's going to mean is, you know, men walk away. Say it takes a year just for everyone to realize that, okay, we now need to do something about this because we are really hip deep in this, right? It could be 30 years of clear up. It could be at least 2 generations of clear up. And that's why men collectively haven't walked away. And it's the same for us as truck drivers. Yes, we could all go on strike tomorrow, and yes, we could cause an awful lot of damage inside of a week. I reckon.
Oh yeah, but you'd be like a year and a half cleaning up the mess.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So what's the point of going on strike? It's not.
Well,
it's going to quadruple our workload at the end of the day. And all we've done is, as I say, is taken a shotgun shell or an anti-aircraft shell to our feet. We've just hurt ourselves, you know.
Oh, and then we turn to the same people, you know, who up to now have been unwilling to entertain our appeals and say, look, you know, we've been gone away, and you say, it's okay for us to come back now. Now, to the degree that you are going to roll up your sleeves and help us clean up this mess, which is now huge, to that degree, we'll be back. If you're just going to make some window dressing changes, right, and discontinue some programs and leave everything in disarray, we're not coming back. That again, the correlation to a work stoppage, is the same. Like, you come back from a work stoppage and start working again, and if it's been long enough, then the work site and the tools and the equipment is in disarray, and that's when you look around and say, well, it looks like we're still on strike. We'll be back when you guys are ready to help us put this crap back together.
Yeah, I've got.
And that's sort of the key, I think, that the maybe said, that at least hit me, was he said, when it came to COVID, it was the men with calluses versus the men in suits. It's always the men with calluses that have been pushing this economy, that have been pushing sort of the world. I don't want to say like a war or anything, but it always has been like the higher class versus the lower class. People argue about immigration, but guess what's the part of immigration they don't mention? The fact that there are a lot of immigrants who take those jobs that little Miss Prancy would never dare take. She's at her desk typing a paper and a report, but she would never dare become an avocado picker or something.
Yeah. And
there's this book I've been reading, and it was talking about the big issue of all these billionaire CEOs that all meet up at Davos once a year, and they all, after COVID, try to act like they saved the world because they put all this money into their company, giving them masks and gloves and this and that, acting like they saved the world. And in reality, they didn't do that much, but they were giving themselves a pat on the back, while in reality, they caused more harm than they did any good whatsoever.
Right. And that does, on the one hand, that does shine the light on, the reality of this, which is a class issue. It's not a gender issue, and it's not a race issue, and it's not a what part of the, world you're sitting on issue. It's an unfortunate reality. The same people that abscond with movements and, send Dylan Mulvaney a special Bud Light can and put the, the pride flag on their logo every year. It is them. Okay. But a ray of hope for all of this, okay, that I think, like I said, would get a lot more visibility if men were more organized in their disengagement. The ray of hope is, and you kind of touched on it, tall lady, there are like very large numbers of ordinary women out there, that are more than ready to make things right. They are eager to cooperate with anything that looks like it will make things better, for everybody. And, a lot of them, for example, are, the girlfriends, wives, mothers, and sisters of men, and they're ready to go. The only what they're lacking is somewhere to point all that energy, right? I as you guys know, I spend a lot of time in other circles, and that's becoming a topic of conversation more and more, right? Because one thing that they still complain about, is the for example, the kind of man, that's still willing to be obnoxious and overly forward and harassing, and the kind of thing that I'm talking about, it resolves that specifically. and it takes accountability for that kind of man, as someone, as somebody doing the wrong thing. Because again, collectively, it's not that complicated to turn to that man and say, if you don't knock that off, right, then we're going to throw you back among the sodomites. We're going to hand you back to the people that, have been mistreating you all these years. You can stay with us, but only if you knock that off, right? Because otherwise we don't need you. That at the end of the day is what this is all about, is making it clear that we don't need everything that we've been slaving away and sacrificing for all this time. We want it, because we do, right? And, we believe in it because we do. Like Ma was saying before he had to go, even someone like himself, has a consideration to have a family, and have descendants, right? So this isn't about things that that we ought to walk away from permanently anyway as a group, and again, I have to point to myself and say, I can't be used as the model because that's not reasonable, right? It really isn't.
My question would be, okay, let's talk about a mass walkout by men for a minute. How long is that going to take? 5 years, 10 years, a generation, 2 generations?
I think the better question is it even possible talking about the class issue? Some men will suck up till God knows when, if they know that they, right? But if they think it's going to give him some advantage.
Yes, they will. That's true.
Yeah, and that's
we generally call them male feminists. But the point I'm trying to make is, right,
like what's the timeline and what's the exit strategy?
Yeah.
And I believe handled properly under the conditions that we're under right now is, don't forget, okay, what I'm talking about is actually occurring as we speak. Okay.
It's occurring to a degree, but it's not. Are we talking about a truckers' strike here, which 5 to 7 days down the road, every politician under the sun is going to be on their knees begging us to come back to work?
I say handled properly, it might not even be that long. Even just the proposal would be enough. And to just, to say, look, we are already in the midst of, a disorganized work stoppage, which is what, all of this is. But, we intend to organize and solidify it and, continue it and support it unless and until, there are equal and, equally considered negotiations. Yeah, because that's the only thing that's missing. And to just say that, and to say, look, the thing that you're so afraid of is already happening. The barbarians are already at the gate, bro. And all we got to do is, organize the barbarians. If that's what you want, we can do that, but we would rather not.
I think, and you may not like me for this one, but I think the crisis of men's mental health is probably the best weapon we've got in order to organize. And the reason I say that is there is far too much bloodshed. And if you can get enough men who become sick and tired of the bloodshed that is men's mental health, we all know the suicide statistics. We all know they're not good. They're far from good. Yeah. But if that becomes the issue that is a final breaking point for men as a group in society to say, no, fuck this, we're done. We're down in tools. We're just walking away. Until you decide that you want to take our mental health seriously, the suicide statistics, and you actually want to start putting things in place, we ain't coming back.
Right.
And not just
Right,
literal
and-
bloodshed either, sort of figurative bloodshed too. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that we've been taking away their spaces, the fact that, it's like we seem to try to keep them away from having their own community, and
This is
the lack of, teaching them to, like, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say not teaching, we aren't teaching them any goals, but like sort of teaching them that they have to,
I know
I guess,
I've
use
said
themselves.
that
No,
I want to discuss the whole.
guys, what you're both talking about, those are both primary points of negotiation.
Yeah.
Right? To just say, look, yes, we are talking about the legal system, and yes, we are talking about education and employment opportunity and public services, et cetera, et cetera. But to be honest with you, redressing and correcting all of those things probably won't help at this point until you can also address our mental and emotional well-being, because Dead Duck, as you pointed out, the lion's share, of the rebuild, I guess, still going to fall to us.
Yeah.
And that's just that's inevitable. And again, newly and properly, healed and rehabilitated men are very hardworking. We really are. We are go-getters. We are clever. We're versatile. We tend to be enthusiastic. We're happy not to be miserable anymore. And we all have this like incentive to keep it that way. By any means necessary. And if that means, doing a lot of grunt work, I've done it. I continue to do it, and I don't mind. I like it.
Yeah.
But I'm in a situation where I can.
Yeah. The tall lady was just talking about male only spaces, which I'm sure, as you all know, that's one of my big things about the suicide rate being what it is. But also, I know I said I wanted to speak about the trans issue on a separate show, but there's the great irony of the current rhetoric around transgender issues, in particular trans women, not wanting them in women's spaces, which the irony there being we've had over 50 plus years of being told male only spaces are sexist and everything else because they exclude women. So we've had women going into men's spaces, all right, not necessarily toilets, but women going into men's spaces, invading those spaces, changing those spaces to suit them. And now that the shoe is on the other foot to a certain degree, women are kicking off. I've been doing an awful lot of thinking about this whole trans thing, and it's something I want to go over in a show properly. But there's a great irony there. I don't know if you agree with me on that or not, but
I do, and I think most people do that give it any real thought. That it's ironic and probably kind of tragic that it's come to this, but part of the, I guess, renegotiation of all of this, it involves commitments from us as well, and that is if a point of negotiation is that we do in fact need our own spaces, then, we have to commit to handle those spaces properly, right? One massive failure among men that happened long ago, that we sitting here have nothing to do with. It ain't our fault. But it happened long ago that men's spaces were allowed to degrade, and to become useless to almost everybody that was part of them, and that, the women at the time looked rightly at it and said, this is a waste of time. If we want men's spaces, then we have to say, we will have these spaces, and we will use them for the following. And it won't be, the kinds of things that men's spaces ended up being. And it's not that hard. I mean,
No.
men in men's spaces and among men naturally, they naturally become comfortable with, sort of natural leadership, right?
Yeah.
And natural, lack of a better term, charisma, I guess.
Hmm.
Somebody that just kind of looks like they know what the hell they're doing, and that's like I say, that bears examination, right? And it bears accountability.
Hmm.
That is like I've told people that have requested that I lead something. So you better, okay, well, okay, if I have to, but if I do, it's going to be like this and this and this, and in return, if I am leading this, I am required to do this and this and this, and I'm to be held accountable for it. If I fail, I don't want to not hear about it, because if I do, I'm no different than any other human being. If I fall on my face and nobody notices, I just get up and brush myself off and move on. But if people point out to me, Les, you kind of fell on your face there, then I have to stop and say, yeah, I kind of did, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, see, the women not only went into men's spaces and said that these are useless, they did far worse than that. And the damage, I reckon, okay, just going back to the suicide thing for a minute, I reckon we could track the eradication of male-only spaces and the increase in the suicide rates.
Probably, at least as an aggravating factor. In fact, I can like draw you a map.
Yeah.
But as I say, if they get reinstituted, us men can't allow them to begin looking like the ones that got left behind, because the fact is, you're right. Women looked at that. They didn't just shut it down. They ran it over and took it over and ran off the end of the earth with it. And what did men do? We just hung our heads and said, oh, golly, we're sorry. We won't do it again. Her to her. And it didn't have to be that way either, right?
Yeah.
We could have said, yeah, you're right. This is just, we're just spinning our wheels here. Leave it to us. We will correct it. You don't have to worry about it. And while you're at it, you might want to look at your own backyard.
Yeah.
But we didn't do that, and in fairness to men, it's very hard for us to do that with women. We don't like to do that. We don't like to have that kind of conversation with them, especially publicly and especially in large groups.
Which is why we're having so many problems now.
Exactly. And
nobody wants to hold
right.
women accountable that need to be held accountable.
Right. And the little bit of sense of relief that I have is that I look at that and say, at least I wasn't involved. Right. And I might have ideas for solutions, but I didn't like, break the outfit. I just have a few ideas on how to put it back together.
Yeah.
And like I said, don't let anybody tell you different. There's plenty of culpability to go around. Like the most I guess you would call it, extreme examples of like women in large groups behaving badly, right? And being unreasonable. Still got to say, it didn't have to turn out that way. And it didn't, the solution to that problem didn't have to be, men asserting dominance over them, right? It could have been as simple, just like I'm proposing now. It could have been a simple matter of saying to them collectively, that we're not going to try to stop you from being this way. We're just not going to help you with it. And we failed at that outright,
Yeah.
we did. I mean, all of my growing up, like I never said anything about it. I could have, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And
See,
now there's a mess.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, listening to all this, while I was busy, I think Mal was talking about, the whole MGTOW thing and, not having people give you a binary way out of the problem or what have you. I will say, if my relationship ended tomorrow, I would be MGTOW, but I would be, doing things my own way, not the way somebody is telling me to. I wouldn't just follow the MGTOW roadmap, as it were. It would very much be living my life for me and, still being a father at the same time.
Right. But,
I just,
the penalty, right? The cost.
Yeah.
Is that, then your approach to all of it would have to become more like mine.
Yeah.
It would have to be this, kind of very mindful tightrope walk, where you never, in other words, you say, okay, I'm done with that whole dog and pony show. I'm out of it. I ain't doing it no more, blah, blah, blah. But then you would have to say, but even so, and even with all that, it's only because I'm only walking away permanently because I can, and because it's reasonable for me personally to do so.
this is it. This is it.
Yeah. And like your son and, all the young men that I talk to, then you would also have to say, you cannot use me as the model for this.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
that's,
you can't walk away or disengage from any of it from a position of fear, bitterness, resentment, or despair. If you do, you won't come back.
Yeah. And this is, I think that's the place where MGTOW in particular went wrong, is it started to push itself on young men. It's all well and good putting more, like, it's all well and good having these podcasts and conversations and things where you say to young men, look, dating's a shit show. It's very hit and miss, but forewarned or fully armed or what have you. That's one thing. If they did that, I don't think there'd be much of a problem with it. But it's being pushed as the only way to go.
Right.
Is to follow this philosophy, to do things this way. Work yourself into an early grave, go down the gym, do this, do that. And the great irony of all this is it only makes you more attractive, again, in America for the most part, because women are different all around the world, different cultural backgrounds and everything else.
Right.
For American women, it
makes
just makes you more attractive.
It makes you more attractive to them, and it makes you more visible to the kind of women that you're better off ignoring you.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's like, again, as far as MGTOW and really 90% of the quote red pill movement, that well is poisoned. Okay. I mean, it's not recoverable. It's not like you can just go in and say, okay, we're going to do it different now, and we're going to maintain frame, but we're going to do it reasonably. They could have done that. Like I said, 20 years ago, the door was wide open, and it was just totally ripe for the picking. And they walked right past it like it was never there, and now it's like, well, then, now you can't do anything, right? Now you can't, you're stuck, right? You You can't do anything other than what you are doing now, and you're going to have to do it from now on.
Mm.
You know? Or, you know, you just bail on it and, you know, be out there on your own, right? With nobody's support. I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, somebody from any of those communities would really have to prove themselves to me, you know, in order for me to take them on and say, okay, you know, let's do it right this time. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not likely to do that with, you know, somebody, even a guy like Better Bachelor is, at the end of the day, seems like a, you know, jovial enough fella, and, you know, it tries to be reasonable, but everything he says puts him in a place where, you know, as I say, he can't come back, you know.
Yeah.
That he's marked himself as someone who, you know, has quit the job and can't be negotiated with. You know, he can't be like, you know, brought into, you know, a new way of doing things. Right. He's got what he's got. And if, you know, God bless him, if he's happy, you know, if he's like, this is how I'm gonna, like me, you know, this is, I just want to ride this train to the last stop, you know.
Yeah.
But like, the difference between him and me is, you know, I'll ride this train to the last stop, but I'll do it I'll try to do it in a loving and mature way, you know, whereas he's just kind of pissing out the window.
Yeah.
I'm like,
he is.
you know, don't do that, man. But
Yeah.
you know,
I've
again,
said,
it just makes it, you know, it just makes it so that he can't be part of what needs to be, you know.
yeah,
He's just sort of a neutral.
it's different. It's a difficult balancing act between MGTOW and TradCon. That's what's needed. It's a case. I think what is really needed, because the one thing all these sort of red pill and MGTOW types talk about is the power of the threat of walking away, and I think that is needed. I do think that if you can turn around to somebody or to society and say, if you carry on with this, we're gone,
Right.
and we ain't coming back,
Right.
then you'll probably find the society will go, yeah, we don't want that. That's not a good idea.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, you know, in the red pill, they call it dread game, you know, but it's like, I guess, to focus on that, you know, and make it appear that you're doing it selfishly and kind of narcissistically, you know, it for one thing, it won't work, you know. For another thing, on any large scale, for another thing, it puts that person in a place where at any moment, you know, the object of their dread game could just turn to him and say, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
You know, and again, you know, it's about making things bad enough for them that they feel like they have no choice. And it's like, you know, that isn't going to end well, no matter who's doing it, you know. But at the same time, to be able to say to them, you know, look, this is an inevitability of the status quo.
Yeah.
This, you know, this collapse that we're talking about is unavoidable at some point. No one will be able to stop it.
Yeah.
And, you know, to turn to them and say, you know, we can hurry that along, so, and be there to pick up the pieces, you know, but how about we just rework all this right now before it falls apart, right? And let's get back to it.
Yeah, and you want to give the tradcons enough of men continuing in the vein in which they have been, so as to make them happy as well. You want to be able to tread that line, the tightrope between walking away and putting your head in the noose.
Yes, And,
And
you know,
it's-
to appeal to their, I don't know what you would call it, you know, their sense of being right by saying, look, you know, there are many things about what you know, what you want to see that are a good idea. And, you know, they are for the common good and beneficial, you know, and yeah, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the time, you know, men are probably the most innately geared to make that happen. But, you know, to negotiate with them and say, look, you know, we don't live in that world anymore, you know, and to deny women the opportunity to do that with us means that in less time than the blink of an eye, we will be back where we are now.
You
know, and there won't be anything anyone can do about it.
This is, you know, I'm going to give a preview to what I want to talk about. We cannot solve the transgender issues without, I don't think personally, heading straight towards 1930s Germany. I can see no way of doing it. In reality, we've gone too far, and to a certain degree, we have gone too far with the whole gender argument, the gender equality argument.
I might be more optimistic than you.
Well, all right. Let's give a bit of a preview.
I think there's still time, but go ahead.
Right. The whole trans argument around bathrooms. Okay, we don't want trans women, biological men, however you want to term them, in women's bathrooms. That's what people are saying. Okay, well, that's based in misandry for a start. The idea is that all men are sexual predators and are going to go around raping young girls in bathrooms and things like that. It's a misandrous idea. So what do? Well, the simple answer is to create a third tier of bathrooms for trans men and women to use. The problem then comes, how do you police that so that biological men and women use their own bathrooms and trans men and women use their own bathrooms? Well, for biological men and women, it's fairly obvious. Okay. Trans men and women, not necessarily so. So they would probably have to carry around some kind of ID so that if they're stopped, they're able to show either they are biological man or woman or trans man or woman. It's straight out of 1930s Germany, because what happened to the group that had to carry around ID cards to show?
They ended up in gas chambers.
Exactly. So, you know, that I'm going to go into this in more depth when we actually do the episode on trans issues. And
I mean, everything you're saying, you know, is how would you put it? You know, an obstacle to the status quo. You know, in other words, you can point to it and say, this looks really familiar. You know, but again, you know, that provides a lever of power, right, to those of us that want, you know, a true and sustainable renegotiation of all of this.
You
know, we can go to those people and say, look, you know, this is what we have right now. You know, and it's you know, again, these barbarians are at your gate. You know, and we are here, you know, these few of us are here saying we want a way out of this mess for all of us, but we so far you are not listening to us. You know, when people bring up traditional conservatism, to me, you know, I always say, you know, in all the conversations that I have in all the different spheres of this, you know, the ones that are really hard for me to see reason, you know, and just admit reality are traditional conservatives. You know, it's a real stumbling block for me to just point and say, look out the freaking window. You know, does this look okay to you? You know, because it don't look okay to me.
Yeah, it's the same with both sides of the political coin. Again, particularly in America, although it's getting bad everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
you-
I mean,
I can
that's
point people in directions in the direction of solutions. The only problem is they're not going to like the costs to those solutions. And the solutions are simple.
Yeah,
In-
yeah,
it-
that is a
you know,
true stumbling block is, when again, when I have these conversations and, I will say that the more left-leaning types are more open, but you're right. When I like itemize the bill,
Hmm.
that's when it starts getting to be a really uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
But I can always say, if you're unsatisfied, we are happy to refund your misery.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is, it's like the whole race thing. Just stop looking at people and the color of their fucking skin. It's obvious. It is so
Well, no, I know, but honestly, Dead Duck, that is deliberate. Don't
Right.
forget the
Yeah, I know. I know
power
it's
structure
deliberate.
that's behind all this. Okay, they are absolutely not interested in stability.
It's
That things got to the place where race relations had start becoming more stable and more progressive. And you notice within 5 years of that happening, all of a sudden there's rioting in the streets and, government buildings being burned.
yeah.
They did
It's
that on purpose. They
yeah.
don't want to see people be happy.
Or live
Well, to
side
be
by side.
fair, also, it just, you profit so much when you can divide groups and actually give supposed large numbers of how many people there are in those groups by trying to disregard the people that exist that are a mix of those groups, coming from two enigmas.
Yeah,
For sure. I mean, that
yeah,
that introduces, an anomaly that, like I said, it provides for more stability and like social order. They do not want that.
yeah,
If
Like,
we're
I know a
all
lot of my Hispanic side friends are going to disagree with me on this, but one of my biggest issues personally is I call my brother and I enigmas because we're half and halves, but is the fact you've got these. Yes, there is very few minorities in comparison to to be honest, the white population at universities and stuff. But I can't stand that they incentivize race so much sometimes, because it really is what causes that divide that we're seeing, whether it be at college and politics or wherever else. A lot of the stuff that's going on is there are issues within those groups, and they're not fully being addressed properly because they're more focused on how they can get self incentivized by being able to divide us as much as they can. And then what they
but
do with the people that they can't divide is they either try to act like we A, don't exist, or B, they try to force us into an identity that we don't want because it's
yeah.
you
No,
can't
it's
claim we're just one
if
thing.
you become settled, and reasonably content with who you are, how can they make money and get power with that?
Yeah.
If you are
Have you-
unsatisfied and unhappy, then you are more likely to pay attention to them and give them stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard what happened on the Piers Morgan show on GB News recently?
No, what?
No, there was a British actress, black actress. She went on Piers Morgan and I think she tweeted out something about the balcony at the King's coronation being terribly white. Now she's gotten absolutely slammed for it as a race baiter, which essentially is what it is. And forgetting the minor detail that the British royal family come from a long line of white Western Europeans, so they're generally going to be white. And she's gotten absolutely pummeled for race baiting. She's been told to go away and shut up and sort of leave us all alone. And the thing I find with these virtue signaling muppets you get on the internet in particular, and in the news and what have you, you know, oh, I'm pro LGBT and I'm pro black and I'm pro this and I'm pro that and I'm pro something else. They are the most bigoted bunch of morons you could ever come across.
Yeah.
You know, they'll say, you know, something about white straight men, for example, and you think that's racist, sexist, and you obviously have a thing that you don't like heterosexual people. You know, if I came out with a comment about a minority person who happened to be gay or what have you, or be on the autism spectrum or something similar, I would get absolutely pummeled for it. But it's perfectly okay for you to sit there and make some extremely bigoted comment because you're full of virtue and everything else. You know, so when the best
And the
way
problem is they think they're educated. I think that's really a bigger problem too. I'm sorry, that sounds bad to say, but like it really is the truth of it. It's the fact, like the best example I can give, talking about the coronation. So some of these protesters, I found this out from reading around the news. Yes, reading is something you need to do, people. Surprise, surprise. But the point stands, I was reading around, I found out that one of the biggest things behind these protests against King Charles III is this supposed history with slavery and the unfairness behind how some of these territories and other countries were sort of dominated by the UK at one point, and the racial tensions behind that. One of the leading women who's speaking about this, who wrote on this of it, is a professor in the United States who's never been to the UK in their life.
Well, of course not.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
I'm like, so let me get this straight. And her specific one, I forgot what it was. I think she's talking about the African countries. I'm like, so first of all, she is African American, but she admitted that, you know, like her family's been in America for the longest of time. So I'm like, so you're trying to act like that you have some kind of thing affecting your life that was done by British royalty when you've never been in the UK. You're not a UK citizen. Your family isn't from the UK, and slavery happened over 400 some years ago. Am I saying slavery's bad or good? No, I'm not. I'm just saying, how are you talking about this and saying, I was so personally affected, and, you know, like, the historical part, okay, that can make sense. She could back that up with documents and stuff, but then she went into personal effects in the modern day. Please explain to me how in God's name are you personally affected by this?
Yeah, that's, you know, historical research is a lot like scientific research, you know, in that if you do it properly, right, then you've examined it from enough different sides that you can say, okay, here's my conclusion, and it can't be anything else. You know, and
even that
I've
history isn't
covered
that
all the
strict
bases.
either. We're still finding things that change history as we go by.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like up to now, this is everything the research has to show. The other thing you can do is start with a conclusion, right? You know, start with an idea that you have and just go through history and look for all the supporting evidence and ignore all of the other evidence, you know, all the evidence against it. And of course, in, you know, in the physics departments at universities, when you do that, then all the other physicists stand up and say, you full of crap. You know?
Yeah.
But in the history departments and the sociology departments, they're not really doing that. You know, that's why it's, and again, this is another point of negotiation, you know, to say that, you know, this is degradation of something that has taken us from, you know, from misery, subsistence, and early death, you know, to modern life for all its flaws, you know, that is at least a little bit better. And, you know, this kind of methodology. And if we go back to, because that's how it used to be in the good old days, you know, when like people had a life expectancy of like 42, You know, so we can go back there if you want. It's just that if you do, we're not going to help. You
Mm.
know, we're not going to help you do that. Right?
And the thing is, too, it's this personal effect idea that they're trying to add in history. That's really the biggest problem. The whole personal aspect of things. It's just
Well, the British history of
it's
slavery
very
is
aggravating. It's
Yeah.
like you aren't personally affected by this. I'm sorry, some things happened 100 years ago, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't exactly personally affected you. You know, and then the people who are these supposed supporters of things are like, oh, all these horrible things are going on, and they don't understand anything about where it's happening. I mean, the best example I can give is my mother's South American. Of course, I still talk to my family from South America, and there was this girl who made this unbelievably ignorant post about these riots, which unfortunately happened in my mother's country. And she was like, "Oh, well, you know, it's affecting people, and it's so horrible. And I mean, it's like police brutality. We have police brutality here, and that's horrible in this country. And you know, like I'm seeing my friends get hurt by police brutality. I'm like, yes, you're seeing people hurt by police brutality here, but over there it's very different. Last I checked, honey, the U.S. doesn't have a cartel problem. They didn't have a guy named Pablo Escobar.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. And
you don't have people coming with bombs on motorcycles every day or something. Like, there's a reason our police is the way it is. Do I like how heavy they went? No. So there's a reason they are trained that way because of a country history that you are very unaware of, apparently.
Yeah. And, you know, this is a double-edged sword because depersonalizing everything is unwise only because it separates you from what you are concerned with. And the trouble with doing that is what I like to call encroachment. You know, whatever you disregard in your own life has a bad habit of sneaking up and biting you in the butt. You know, but on the other hand, making it entirely personal, you know, to the point where you're claiming that things that happened hundreds of years ago have a direct impact on you today, basically just invites that bite to your butt. You know, it's like it can't be really done either way. I mean, I can make the case that probably things like transportation in the 15 and 1600s had an impact on the culture of my ancestors in Wales and Ireland. But the hard reality is that no part of my family showed up in the New World at all until they opened Ellis Island and needed coal miners, right? Now, like I say, I can make the case that because of what happened, 300-400 years ago, it had an impact on whether that part of my family would even come here or not, right? Correspondingly, because I also have roots in Eastern Europe and Russia, a lot of the hijinks that were going on there certainly had an impact on that part of my family making its way over here. But for me to say, hey, all I am is a product of those historical events, that's basically just me saying, I'm entirely just powerless and useless and ineffectual in my own life because everything about me and everything about my life happened hundreds of years ago. It's unreasonable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, supposedly intelligent people are starting to buy that idea. The reason they're starting to buy that idea is because that's what the powers that be are selling. I don't buy that. I don't believe in it. I don't buy it. I even get it in with people in the, therapy community about racial trauma. I can make the case for, the effects of previous generations' trauma having a direct impact on the current day life of, their descendants. I can make that case. Okay. But what I have to do to make that happen is to rob them of their own agency here in current day life and say, you cannot be responsible for this, and there is nothing you can do to resolve it. Okay? And if I do that, then, like I said, what I'm doing is saying, if you step back far enough, there's no hope for anybody.
Mhm.
And you guys know that, the concept of trauma is very close to me. I understand it really clearly, right? And I understand, that it has an impact that can't be easily undone, even after I'm gone. The things I've done as a traumatized person is going to have an impact on life after I'm not here no more.
Mhm.
Like, in order for me to have a sense of agency, and in order for me to heal up at all, a big part of the recovery is me kind of taking the bit in my own teeth and saying, I am going to see what I can do to clean that up before I go.
Yeah.
And like I said, if I can't realize that, then why should I do anything?
Mm.
I mean, why not just retreat, into my own misery and my own isolation again, and just like, ride it to the last stop.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not just around because I'm around, I'm not just here because I've always been here, and agency implies purpose, it's for a reason, at least the reason satisfies me. It's like, I am doing what I'm doing because it's a good enough reason for me to keep doing it and to keep doing anything.
Yeah.
And again, to take it back to our discussion, these are points of negotiation, right?
Mm.
These are points to sit down at the table and say, here's what we've got. This is a proposal to redo all this. Okay. Now we can stay with what we have right now. It's just that, the only thing we're gonna not do is cooperate, because we don't like it. Right. But if you don't like it either, we can do this instead. Right. And at the end of the day, again, leave it in their hands. Right. And say, we don't have to do it. We don't have to renegotiate this, and we don't have to make these corrections before it all goes to crap, but we can if we want to. Like, either way, things are going to change, right? And that is inevitable. You can always lean back on the inevitable and say, no matter what happens, we're either going to make it better or it's going to get worse all by itself.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't like that, man. I wish, things could stay just like moderately miserable and a little happy once in a while from now on. Life isn't like that.
No, it's not.
All right. I guess we've probably played this topic out and it's been 2.5 hours. So any final thoughts from anyone?
Final thoughts on the subject. I don't know how easily men are going to be able to walk away. And I say that purely as a truck driver because we know the damage that will be done if we do. And so I think small pockets of men, and in reality it is small pockets of men, walking away is manageable. But if and only if men suddenly organise into a group and decide to down tools collectively, we have a real problem on our hands that is going to force everybody to sit down around the table. Whether or not they'll listen or whether or not they'll just try and shout over everybody else is a completely different matter. So for me, it's a case of time will tell. I don't know if anyone else has got anything they'd like to add.
Tall lady, Mao, anybody?
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. So
Well, I don't know. I was gonna try to run this, just saying that, you know, it would be interesting if a walkout like that ever happened. The obvious results would be tragic, but I think in many ways, unfortunately, we are seeing a social walkout, maybe of sorts already. And I mean, it's not too late. Things could be discussed, things could be changed, but it's going to take a lot of recognition and acknowledgement and accountability work, and more importantly, just a lot of trying to figure out how to get used to, I guess, solving a complex issue and finding a more adaptable change in a sense. Very cool.
yeah, true. And like personally, I do believe that there are solutions to all of these problems. It's just that so there are a lot of people with different ideas in general, and there's a lot of like fighting for like solutions. And unfortunately, what I've seen personally is a lot of people just waiting for the status quo to finally end, so their solutions can come on top. Which to me personally, I believe that's like the worst thing that someone can do. Like in my opinion, it's better to compromise and try to work within the system to get some of what they want instead of just waiting for all to collapse first. And you do see that in the mantra of enjoying the collapse that some people believe in, which is to make themselves not feel so bad about abandoning society and allowing it to decay. But personally, I don't think that's actually gonna work. I think people in general, they just work towards solutions, and it's better for everyone to be there working together so their voices can be heard. So we know what they want and how to fix them. Because if people resign to like complain in silence, like that doesn't really help anyone. And I do want everyone to get what they want. Like I don't like the idea of men resigning away from like marriage, raising children, dating, like attending like university or getting jobs or whatever they want. I don't want them to like resign away from that. So if they get what they want, that's for the best. But they need to be there and they need to work together with everyone. So they need to be part of the system in some way, at least in order to correct them. So that'll be like my input about it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. And thanks everyone for listening and staying with us. Everybody have a good week, and we will see you all again next time. Have a good one.